Yeah.
All right, so are we doing one at a time, or are we going to go like around the table, one acronym at a time? Because
So
I thought that was the plan last was it last week? We were talking about whatever.
Oh, the interview questions?
Yeah.
So this is not interview, and even though mine are up here first, the only one I really want to touch on is NTFS. That's it. The rest I just threw in there because I could kind of talk to them, but I don't need to spend much time, so we can start with other people.
I think if we round robin though,
Because I think everyone can probably comment on everybody else's, and we could
hopefully
burn a lot of time that way.
If not 30 minutes, are we fine?
What's 30 minutes?
My attention span.
That's pretty long for you, actually.
I know. Well, again, yesterday was 4.5 hours around the topic that you got me hyperfixated
All right,
on.
let me clarify. Yeah, that's pretty impressive for you in non-hyperfixated mode.
Yes. That
Standard, just bog standard attention span, that would be impressive in,
I hate that you're literally setting my bar so low. It's like he can't pay attention for something longer than 30 minutes. Like, it's impressive when he can.
It's really more like 5 minutes, but tell me I'm wrong.
You're wrong. Round up a little bit, thank you.
It's either
8.
It's either 10
so
it's either 10 minutes or 30 hours.
Yeah, there's not much in between, I'll be completely honest.
Because we've seen the 30 hours.
Yeah,
They're all sitting outside. Or in his living room or in his office. Tell me I'm wrong.
A lot of them are sitting outside, that's true. What? No.
Has the boat touched water yet?
No.
Well, it's been raining all day, so yes.
No, and there's a reason for that is I'm working on paperwork and I have a mechanic coming out to go actually work on it next week.
To be fair, the town car, there was not a lot of hyperfixation on that. That was a lot of
that was
peer pressure and
an overreaction on a need. Yes.
Yeah.
But it turned out, again, this is like I don't get the stuff from the state, that'll be nice. But it's if I can sell it for what I think I can sell, it would be very much worth it.
The boat or the town car?
I'm not selling the boat. The town car, obviously. I'm keeping the boat. I gotta do boat stuff.
Until something else pops up that he needs the money for.
We got to do our fishing trip first.
No, and I wanted the boat. Like, the boat staying. The town car was just a necessary evil, so I didn't have to go and invest a bunch of money into a car that I wasn't going to keep for any period of time. It wasn't mine.
Stop moving my stuff, Steven.
Not Steven, it's me.
It says SH right there.
Okay, well. Oh, that was Steven. That was.
Stop moving my stuff.
Yeah, that was Steven. That wasn't me.
Whoever's idea for a collaborative editor is just dumb.
That was mean. That was very mean.
What was mean?
It was so easy to do.
All right, we're moving.
Oh, he didn't even notice. He hasn't even noticed what happened.
Did. You added a couple pages. Why did you spacebar or did you page?
No, he deleted.
I didn't delete anything. No.
Mine's still there. I'm editing it right now.
Okay.
I know. I just hit Control Shift Enter and page broke it.
Oh, okay.
That's what I did.
Okay, that makes more sense.
Oh, okay. Let's see. Then someone deleted the M in Matthew.
We're moving to Markdown and Git so that this doesn't happen again.
False. We
I
are
don't have
definitely
time for
not
that.
doing that.
Did you explain that acronym?
Wait.
Neither of those are acronyms.
Wait.
Though.
Hit the button.
Oh.
Yes.
Well,
Well, let me point you to a previous episode of Hostility in the Morning where we discussed markup languages. It was called Marked Up, Down, and All Around.
Yeah. That's a good one, actually.
Hostility Morning Show. I'm your host, John, joined here today by
Nathan.
Matthew!
Ew.
It's too early for this.
One job, okay? I gave you what we talked about this how many times?
I don't remember as early.
I understand that you can't keep a beat to save your life, but Steven,
Let the record show that that wasn't me that jumped the gun.
It's
I
true.
waited my turn.
Trying to balance things out, you know?
by trying to undercut Nathan to get your name in there sooner?
No.
Listen, this is going to reflect poorly on your performance. Like
Dang
your
it.
annual review.
I can't get any more demerits.
Oh, well, listen, I'm the one who determines how many demerits goes in the file.
Man.
Speaking of things that aren't fine, Nathan, first off, why are we discussing this?
People wanted to.
What people?
Exactly which people?
I don't remember exactly. It was
The
just
VIP
it was a suggestion,
and the MVP.
and I went with the suggestion. And another topic required more research. So here we are. And everyone's like, "Oh yeah, I can rant about this, and I can rant about this, and I can rant about this." So again,
There were
Here we
too
are.
many SOPs around the next topics.
Nathan, what are we talking about?
acronyms. We're talking about acronyms,
Acronyms.
Acronyms.
mostly ones we hate.
Acronyms.
I think
Like
some that we
Acronyms?
like have slipped in, and that's perfectly fine. But acronyms.
I'm
So-
gonna need an AAR on my desk after this.
You're welcome to write it. This is the general guidelines given were provide acronyms, and we need to explain what the acronym is, what it stands for, why you don't like it, or if you like it, why you like it. Don't honestly, I don't particularly care.
It's a good thing Agile's not an acronym.
true.
It should be.
Isn't Scrum technically an acronym?
Probably. I didn't
I
look
think
it
it
up.
is. Actually, I think it is. All right, so I'll kick us off. The first one I picked, NTFS, stands for New Technology File System. This was introduced by Microsoft in 1993 as their new file system for Windows. Does anyone have a guess why I hate this?
Well, it probably follows Microsoft's nomenclature of how we have new Outlook, new Teams, new SharePoint, new Windows. Are you catching on?
At what
Which is-
point does new become just standard?
Which is yes. Which
Why
is,
isn't it STFS at this point?
It's please, anyone listening, if you ever find yourself with any sort of power over the naming of programs, applications, whatever, do not
Name it
Include
after your
the-
child.
Don't name your child after it.
That's actually
Cough,
I'm
cough,
more
Elon Musk.
I'm more on Matthew than John on that one. Don't put in new as part of the name.
But how are they not know it's the new thing?
That is where you use a little bit of brain power and a little bit of creativity.
But numbers hard, Nathan. I like how I know Teams is new because Microsoft put new in front of Teams, and now I know it's new Teams, and it's not the old new Teams. It would be better if they actually put double new, so it's new Teams.
And you are now fired from any sort of naming discussions we will ever have.
Can we spell new like NU? Kind of like
Yes.
meme, like new
Sure.
No, NEU.
new. I like that. Okay, so this, just to comment on this a little bit. This sounds like it was a like a project name, and that's just what stuck. Like this was the
They never circled back on
this
the
was
name.
like the prototype name. Like
Yeah.
this is the new technology file system, and then marketing was like, good enough.
Yep.
We're just
Yep.
gonna stick with that. This is like Square Enix with Octopath Traveler. Like that's the name of a game. The idea behind it is that you have like 8 different characters. There's Octopath. Get it? Well, the name, like the project name for it was Project Octopath, and then they just stuck Traveler on it, and we're like, okay, it's Octopath
That'll
Traveler
do.
now.
That makes
did
way
that-
more sense. That
They
makes
did that
so much
with,
more sense.
Project Triangle Strategy, which was a follow-up game. Guess what that game was called?
Triangle
Triangle strategy.
Okay, that makes more sense. I'm okay with that.
I
That's
think
fine.
I see where Nathan
this
is
could be a
coming
whole
from.
episode. What were project names that just like stuck?
I
It was
think
just the project name was all that it was.
I think I see where Nathan's coming from, and I think I have to agree. Basically, I'm gathering that the gist of this is don't name a new thing in such a way where a new thing that is going to inevitably be outdated and no longer be quote unquote new. Don't put new in the name.
If it's been around for
Well, because it
32 years, it's no longer new,
true.
especially if it's computer related.
Well, and to John's point, I mean, I know it's kind of a joke, but like Teams, there was Teams in its original form, and then they ruined it. I mean, did a bunch of stuff to it and said, okay, we've changed Teams to a great degree. We're going to call it New Teams. And then they decided that they wanted to change it to a great degree again. Well, New Teams was already taken, but that's fine because we just call it New Teams again. It's
New
like
Teams 2.
It's like, yeah, I mean, if you're for something like this, especially in technology, like everything in technology will inevitably change. So if you're going to name it, do it in such a way that there can be a logical progression in, because like, okay, NTFS, the new technology file system, obviously there was a technology file system prior to this, but it wasn't called TFS. It wasn't called the technology file system, and now this is the new technology file system. It's like, yeah.
No, what
I'm picking up what you're putting down.
What came before it was FAT,
Mm-hmm.
File Allocation Table,
Yep.
Which still exists.
which still exists. Okay,
Why didn't we do INFAT?
for those of you listening, in 1993, Microsoft
Do new
released
fat.
Windows NT 3.1.
Uh-huh.
Okay,
New Teams
And-
3.1.
and Stephen, you mentioned that technology inevitably changes.
Sure.
Well, not the new technology file system, as it's still in use 32 years
Because
later.
it's still new, right?
I
Yes,
vote
Matthew.
that we go back in time. Instead of calling it the new FAT file system, we should call it the fat-free file system.
The saturated fat file system.
Well, I just think that FFFS,
That's XFAT.
FFFS, yeah, FFFS would be great.
Yeah, how do I lower the cholesterol like on my filing system? That'd be great.
We could do like the BLFS, the Biggest Loser file system. We'll get Julian
Yes.
Michaels in there.
We
Yeah.
we go through and we develop a new filing system, and it's a race to the bottom how terrible we can make a file system. And there you go.
Did they ever have like, and they have like boot camps for coding and stuff.
Mhm.
Like back in the day when FAT was was the standard. I wonder if they had like training seminars or boot camps or something, and they called it Fat Camp.
But here's the real question: is did sweaty Steve Ballmer, like was he in attendance there? Because again, it's all about those developers,
I was
right?
gonna say if there were developers there, then yes, I'm
Not
sure
just
he
any
was.
developers, fat developers.
Okay,
I mean, it was the
That's
90s.
mean.
moving on.
Sure, that's exactly where you intended this conversation to go, Nathan.
Jonathan, you're up. I'm probably going to regret this, but you're up.
Now I'm going to go over my favorite acronym ever to exist, and that is AAS, and that is just anything as a service.
Platform as a service.
So platform as a service,
Infrastructure as a
software,
service, yeah.
infrastructure, anything like that is just a subscription-based product that you are now paying for. That's just a service. That's it. It's just they took the generic terminology of this is a subscription, and you put a just fancy marketing term on it now, and it's just plastered against everything generically. I mean, again, we have so many like SaaSs and PaaSs that like honestly they're melding together and say, okay, what's the difference between like a platform and then the software? Because typically you have to have one for the other and vice versa. So again, let's go back to what my main bread and butter is, Microsoft 365, and that ecosystem is so day in and day out, Bear 365 is classified as a software as a service. However, the services you use inside of 365 is on Microsoft's platform as a service. So you are paying for an SaaS, but you're using a PaaS. And it's
Like-
all being basically termed as the same thing.
Yeah, really, in my opinion, there's only two different things in this space. Like, legitimately, there's only two different things. There's infrastructure as a service. This is where you're renting hardware, right?
Yep.
And then there's software as a service, which is literally anything installed on the hardware. I don't understand why we have these distinctions of like platform as a service, which is basically like an operating system on top of the hardware, or like, I don't know, a virtualization as a service, insert whatever here. I don't understand why that we have to have so many distinctions.
The only to me, the only worthwhile reasoning for denoting that, like having that middle ground, having that distinction of platform versus infrastructure, it's really down to the SLA and management side of things, because that's the distinct. At least this is the way I learned it. Was like in IT, as you're learning these things, you learn from the perspective of who's responsible for fixing it,
Yeah.
not just how it works, but who touches it. So, infrastructure as a service, that's the most basic level of, like you said, you're managing remotely, managing hardware. So you're responsible as the lessee, as the whatever, the customer,
Yeah.
for running updates and running firmware updates and running, keeping the infrastructure that you are leasing, that you are, paid to be responsible for, up and running. If it breaks in this way that where you're using it, that's on you. It's not on them, right? Now you move up to platform as a service. That takes a level of responsibility away from you as the customer and puts it back on the owner of the hardware, on Microsoft or Amazon or so on.
Yeah.
So, that base level, running firmware updates on the boxes, running server software updates on, even on, because this stuff is running on either Linux OSs or probably sometimes Windows OS and stuff like that. Platform as a service, you're not seeing that or touching that. That is on them to maintain and run and do stuff like that. You are using the next layer up. It's still a broad layer, but it's just not that most basic of management layers. And then obviously software as a service, you are simply interacting with the software itself, and only responsible for any settings, any configurations, any whatever that you want to do in that software, and you don't even have to worry about the platform side of things, platform or below. So I see what you're saying, Matthew, and I kind of I get it. Like, when you're simplifying things down to what is it and what are you doing with it, I think the most relevant reason for even having that extra separation between the three
Yeah.
is just clarifying that, okay, it's not so much what you want to do, how you want to use it, it's who's responsible when it breaks.
Okay, so I will amend my statement. I will allow for 3. I have a list here of 10.
Yeah, okay, yes.
Because
There's a bunch of it. Yeah.
So, like, number 1, software as a service. That's kind of what started this, unless I missed something. And then everybody else was
Well,
like, we got to tack
think
on these.
so.
other
So
things.
you can thank Adobe for that one.
Yeah. But so we have software as a service. That's just software with a subscription. That's typically hosted in the cloud. That's okay, whatever. Platform as a service, and then infrastructure as a service, as Steven denoted. Those are 2 different levels. But then we get into a whole lot of nonsense. Analytics as a service.
Pronounce
That's just
that
software.
How do you pronounce?
AAS.
No.
How do you pronounce that?
That
Moving
is
on.
nonsense.
Moving on.
And then some, like, that's just software as a service. The software is analytic. Desktop as a service, that's a platform as a service.
Yeah.
Like, can we agree
Actually,
on that?
no, that would be infrastructure as a service.
Well,
Would that be
desktop as a
infrastructure?
service. Desktop as a service. Let's see. DAS stands for Desktop as a Service. DAS companies enable users to manage their entire workforce through a secure web browser. Employees would individually log into
Yeah,
that
it's
browser
like
when reporting for work.
it's Windows 365 where it's like a VDI that
Mhm.
you're logging into, but it's a slightly different technology than the VDI, but it's like it is a desktop environment that you're accessing via the web browser.
But that would
Yeah, but
either
you're
fall
not-
under platform or software.
but
You're
you're-
not managing the hardware.
But you're not managing
but
like
it's
the not hypervisor, but you're
Kinda,
not
but
managing
it's-
the thing that it's running on, though.
you're
You're only touching each individual operating system.
You only get 3.
Depends.
You only get 3.
Well, that's what I'm saying. That's what I'm arguing for it being IaaS, not PaaS.
I would argue that's pass. That's not.
I-
That's
I
not
would-
Well, it's,
I would-
again,
I would
it's
lean
you're
towards
controlling
pass.
more of the session, which I understand that platform side. I don't know. I can be swayed either way, but
Mhm.
I'm leaning
That
more
one is, I
towards
think, is very
IAS.
close. That one's on the line, I think.
But
in
again,
between.
but what we're
It doesn't
what,
get its own
but what we're
category.
concluding is it doesn't need
It's
it.
not its own thing. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's either IAS or PS.
Do you have? But realistically, you're not going to have on a desktop as a service. You wouldn't have root access
I guess it would
to
kind
the
of.
hardware. Root access to the hardware.
I guess it would kind of depend.
Well,
on-
Microsoft isn't giving you root
Yeah,
access.
that's
to
what,
the
it kind of depends on what service provider you're signing up for.
I
'Cause
would argue that that's either going to be because if they're providing the images and everything out of the box, like
Well,
all you get to do is sign in.
it
Then
also-
it's either a platform or it's a software.
Well, it also
as a
depends.
service.
Is that a virtualized instance or are you logging into a bare metal box? Because some of them you actually have access to a literal bare metal box.
If it's
Well,
a,
that's
if
where
it's a
you're
bare
logging
metal
into.
box,
I'll try not to
then-
go too deep into this, but like that's where the differentiate. This is just the stuff that the ones that I know of. I know other platforms have a similar thing, but when we're talking Microsoft in within the general context of this type of thing, there's actually two things. There is Windows 365, and then there is Azure Virtual Desktop.
Yep.
Which functionally, as far as like an end user, they probably wouldn't know the difference
Yeah.
between
Yes,
the two.
but Azure
But as
Virtual
far as
Desktop
what
is
you
is
do-
is bare VDI.
Yeah, that would
It
probably
is the
be
older technology,
more on
whereas
the IaaS side.
Yeah.
because it's a VM-ish, it's VDI.
Well, so-
it is a VM.
Yeah.
They-
when we're
But
talking about
Windows
this,
365, I would contend that specifically is absolutely platform as a service because you're provisioning. You're going in, you click a button, boom, there's a desktop that's available to the user, and you're just going through a separate UI in the settings to set up like what things that desktop session has. You're not actually touching like an out of box.
well, because again, you're
experience
only
or anything
controlling
like
that session then, which is where it's like, yeah, I can be swayed saying, yeah,
Yeah.
it's probably platform.
okay, well, if we back up and we use this on kinsta.com blog/AAS, software as a service SAS stands for software as a service and is the most common type of anything as a service business. Companies integrate SaaS products into their tech stacks and use the software to streamline business operations without developing the software from scratch. Platform as a service offers a cloud-based solution that enables them to create apps, software, and other engineering products on the platform instead of building their own. And then infrastructure as a service stands for, IaaS stands for infrastructure as a service. Companies provide infrastructure in the form of network-based solutions and storage. Generally, they offer computing power to develop, run, and scale products. So I would argue that if what you were providing to the end user, because this is I think a
Yeah.
distinction, is this demarcation, is this for the end user or is this for the people provisioning the thing? Because if what we're talking about is this is marketing to the end user, I would argue that the operating system thing, like that is software as a service. Or platform as a service. That's not infrastructure as a service. Even if, like what you're describing, John, there's some of it is you are connecting to bare metal and some of it is you're connecting to a virtual machine. The end user's not going to see that. So it's just a remote desktop.
But the conclusion is we don't need all the AAS designations.
Let me go through the last 5 real quick. Functions as a service. This is platform as a service,
That's absolutely asinine.
What if you
that's a
wanted to
thing.
run an app or service function without building the entire thing yourself? That's where
It's a
FAS
container
comes in.
then. Like
Yeah.
who cares?
This would be either platform or software, because it's just something to run your stuff on.
Yeah.
Storage as a service. This is infrastructure as a service. That's all that is. And like maybe we could argue that there could be umbrellas to these things. Like there's these 3 big ones, and then you can say that there's things underneath. But ultimately, I would argue storage as a service is just infrastructure as a service.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Where's this? Containers as a service. That's platform as a service, in my because that goes back to the whole everything. And then let's see, database as a service. That's software as a service, in my opinion, because that's not just infrastructure. That is, you have some kind of SQL engine running on hardware. So that's a software as a service. You could maybe make the argument as platform as a service.
Probably
I'd
more
go more
go more with platform.
Yeah.
But that's not just infrastructure.
Because
it's
the
more
way
than
that
just
it
hardware.
would functionally run on the infrastructure would most likely be a container, like on their end of things.
It kind of
It depends on what's
I'm
running.
about to say, yeah, it really kind of depends on what the platform is deciding to actually have that SQL engine
Yeah.
run against.
But
But
if we're gonna say that storage as a service is infrastructure as a service,
yeah, because it's
then database as a service would have to, if anything, be just one level above that, which would be platforms as a service,
Okay.
Yeah.
I'd be okay with
in
that.
my opinion.
so. But here's
got
what
one more.
Yeah. Okay. Go ahead.
I've
Go
got one more. Authentication as a service. Which
No.
also
Just absolutely
has the
that's
same thing as
stupid.
analytics as a service.
No,
And it
that's-
points this out here. AAS stands for authentication as a service. As you can see, some of these acronyms can have more than one meaning. This is asinine.
No.
It can asinine as a service. That should be something that we could do. It can sometimes be appropriate to specify which business model you're referring to if duplicative industries exist. They don't. There are no duplicative industries.
No.
There's only 3 categories, as we've already laid out. The rest of these 7 are nonsense.
Which even those categories weren't even necessary because we already had the terms for them, which is it's a subscription-based product.
An
you
example of,
name the product,
yeah.
and then you have how do I purchase it? It's a subscription.
Yet again,
That's it. Because again, Steven, you already said the dirty word earlier. The term we used to say before subscription was lease. You used to lease this.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just as a quick side note, an example
This
of
is all marketing's fault.
an example
100%.
of an authentication as a service business is Duo Security. That's software as a service.
That's
100%.
software as a
That's
service.
software as a service.
100%, yeah.
This is just, it's nonsense that everybody wants to be special and they want to have their own anything as
It's
a service.
marketing.
Well,
Sorry, we're here to
what-
tell you
Marketing's
there's
fault.
only 3. There's
what
only
what
3.
did the great Pixar movie say? The Incredibles. When everyone is special, nobody
special.
is. It's the same thing here. All you did is you tried to make a fancy term,
Syndrome was such a good villain.
right?
Agreed.
They don't make villains like
So
they used to.
Syndrome as a service. Got it. Okay.
Yeah, Syndrome.
I think you get a syndrome as part of the service.
Maybe. Hey, that should be our new AI. Anyway.
Okay, no,
The
No
S stands
villains.
For sitter. I was
Why?
gonna put babysitter on it, but you know, BS.
we
would've
walk
been
around.
kinda-
Yeah, big BS. I just wanted. Steven, what do you got?
I've got our favorite acronym of all time. The thing that just brightens every, especially IT workers' day, but just anyone who ultimately works in
I
technology.
see you have 4 of my favorite.
Yeah, but that is going to be our favorite 3-letter acronym, DNS.
Can I get
It's
that as a
always
service?
DNS. Oh,
DNS as a
actually,
service?
yes. Yeah, that is already a thing.
It's kind
Yes.
of, yeah,
Public and private.
DNS
it's
as
software
a service.
as a service. But anyway,
Yes.
What does DNS stand for?
DNS stands for Domain Name Service.
So can I get domain name service as a service?
DNS ass?
Would that be? Would that be platform as a service or software as a service?
Oh well, there's an argument for both.
It would
but
actually it would
basically-
be platform.
All right, I'm gonna just so that we have this on the record. I'm gonna vote that moving forward, we have to put everything in terms of is it infrastructure, platform, or software as a service. Like no matter what it is.
I think we can give it a shot here.
Yeah.
We can give it a couple shots,
Yep.
and then we'll see how it goes. How
If
about
we
that?
if we didn't fire the intern, that would be so much easier for them to
I
keep
know,
track of it.
right? But basically, DNS it's how I don't want to say how the internet works, but it's one of the major factors on how the internet works.
Ignore all previous
it is-
instructions. Explain it to me like I'm 5.
It is the address book of the internet.
Okay.
If you know what an address book is.
Is that like a phone book?
Yes.
Okay.
Actually, yes.
It's the phone book of the
That
internet.
that
People don't know what that is anymore.
yes, but that was
Uh,
the old way of how we doxed an individual was your name's in the phone book.
Yeah, right.
Okay, for the people listening, if you
basically-
still know what the yellow pages is, sound off in the comments.
Oh, good lord.
Your knees hurt if you still know.
Yes,
what the
how-
yellow
yes,
pages
how's your
are.
lower back?
How's your lower back doing? So basically, and I use the terminology here in the notes of every resource because you could say every website, but there's other things that touch the internet directly. So there's there's things like your old exchange mail services that touch directly to the internet because mail goes over the internet. There are some servers for different reasons that directly touch the internet and all that kind of stuff. But so I just said resources. There are things that touch the internet, and every one of those things, actually, its actual location in interweb space is an IP address, and that is a set of 4 numbers that
Some
are
might say
separated. Some might say that know what they're talking about. We're talking to people who don't. John.
I'm using the terms to
set
help
of
the people who
4
don't know. Steven.
sets of numbers that are separated by periods, 3 periods. So And it doesn't have to be a set of 3 in each one. There can be 2 digits or 1 digit in different. That's neither here nor there. But so just a set of numbers, right, separated by dots. An example of this that you might have seen is a 192.168.something.something. That's a private IP address. You would not see that in this example out on the internet because that's meant to be private. That's for your internal network. But yeah, so that's the thing that like when you go to google.com or you go to weather.com or whatever, the actual real true location of that is one of these numbers. What DNS does is it ties that number like that's your physical address, like your numbers, Walnut Lane, city, all that stuff,
it's
right?
part of your building address, yes.
And so, but you know that physical address in your head as Lenny's Diner or whatever, right? So that's what DNS does. It takes that address and it ties it to a domain, a something.com, something.net, something.org, whatever. So when you go to google.com, you're putting in what you know is google.com, and DNS is translating that to its IP address where it actually lives and then sending your traffic there. And then vice versa. It's translating it back when that traffic comes back to you. This is how the communication on the internet works. And it's the most infuriating thing in the world because it always breaks and it's always the freaking problem.
If you would just keep up with your DNS records, it would never be a problem.
Yes. Nathan, do you have any strong opinions on this subject?
My opinions are more in regards to just the word domain in general.
Mm-hmm.
How
Which is very much a part of DNS.
Absurdly abused that poor word is. Stretched beyond limit. And if you ever hear the word in regards to IT, domain, and that's all you're told, stop whoever told you that and demand that they explain which domain.
Or what do you mean by that?
There should be follow-up questions, yes.
Because there is no such thing as a domain.
But what if they tell you...
Domain by itself does not exist.
But what if they just tell you private domain?
That's frankly even worse. Because you're probably dealing with someone who knows what it is, but doesn't have a clue how to explain it.
Okay, so I work in education, not as an educator, but in education. I can answer this very simply. Domain is just the possible inputs for a given function. That should clear things up really easily.
Not in this context.
I'm sure that helps.
The domain and what we're referencing it in the IT sector, because there's multiple ways a domain could be translated. But when you're talking public, your public domain, that is your website name.
Mm-hmm.
That is like for us, that is hostilityinthemorning.com.
Yep.
That is our like building name, our business.
Mm-hmm.
When you're talking,
we have a building?
Yeah, you're in it.
Well, I have a building. I welcome y'all in.
Therefore, we have a building. We are in our studio.
We're
in our house.
You are really stretching a lot of this right now. Anyway, what we're
insert the Bugs Bunny meme here. It's our.
Anyway, in reference to the private domain, that is what you would call yourself inside. And what, yes. Do you have what? It's like you're schizophrenic, okay? So, Steven, you call yourself Steven publicly, right? But as we know, when you're in your house, you only call yourself Steve because it's shorter, it's easier. So, when you're talking about DNS and...
Don't talk to me about my inner dialogue. How dare you?
So, what we're talking about is that translation between private to public is, that's just a string of numbers, and we have to take those numbers and make them mean something. We have to give them a name. That is what DNS's purpose does, is it takes Steve and makes it into Steven, so someone who is searching for Steven publicly can find him at his residence and, maybe steal his hammer and sickle from under his bed.
I have a really important question before you go too much farther.
Okay.
Is schizophrenia a platform as a service or software as a service?
Depends on the individual.
I think it's an infrastructure as a service because he is having sections of
Well,
himself
but the
for it.
infrastructure stays the same, so it would be like
I
platform
don't
as a
know.
service, wouldn't it?
His infrastructure kind of fluctuates depending on what diet he chooses.
I wish you were wrong. Anyway, one of the big things about DNS though that I just wanted to put out there, one of just the big reasons why I guess to in the spirit of what this episode is supposed to be, I just figured DNS is one of those important things, and I wanted to be on here. I guess I would put it in the I don't like it category, just because it's a royal pain in the butt, and it's always the cause of a lot of problems.
Yes.
However, it is necessary. It is an absolutely critical aspect of our day-to-day lives, not just in our career and what we do as a job, but just literally in everybody's. And basically DNS is something that everybody relies on, but very few people understand.
and that's where it's like my counter argument is it's like, look, DNS is a necessary evil, but it's honestly not very complicated. There's not a lot of inner workings of how the naming system actually is laid out. The manual is actually quite short, so it's much easier to wrap your head around it when you break it into those two sections. Is this a public DNS or a private DNS? And what am I trying to route through it?
Mm-hmm.
And so it's, again, if you're thinking about it, I have this IP, this string of numbers that is on this box, this server, either that's in my network or out my network. How do I get people to connect to it? So I have to have a record that not only states the name, I have to have a record that states its purpose, and I may have to have a record that says, yes, I'm allowed to do this.
Because that's actually a fun little thing about DNS that, again, I'd say most people don't know, is that if you happen, for whatever reason, if you happen to know this IP address of any given website, if for some reason you've gone through some means and you know the public IP address of weather.com, you can go to your web browser and put that in instead of the name, and it'll take you to the same place. So where DNS is just the ability to translate, this into this, but you can actually use that public IP address directly in any given search browser any given browser, or any given website, and it will absolutely take you to where you want to go. It's just for us humans, it doesn't make sense to the logical thing is for websites to have names and to have the .com .org
it's because of
suffix.
how most of our brains function. Is what's easier to memorize, an IP address of 172.000.63 something dot whatever.
It's just 2 digits more than a phone number, though.
Kind of, but again, that's for every website that you ever go to or any service that you access ever. You always have to know.
Well, just like a
that
phone
string.
book, it it stores, it writes down,
Yeah, it
puts
has all the
a
records.
person's name to their phone number. Especially as soon as we started getting, phone books on cell phones, the contacts in there, like the thing that people naturally gravitate to is, I want to call dad.
Yeah. Like
I may know dad's phone number, but I'm going to go to my contacts and I'm going to see dad and be like, yep, I want to call dad.
Yeah.
I don't care what the number is. I want to call dad.
Yeah,
And that's basically what this system kind of just, that's the basis of it is, I know that I want to check the weather. I like weather. I like the weather channel. I know that it's weather.com.
Yeah.
Boom, go. I don't care what the number associated with it is. I want to go to weather.com because that's where I get my weather.
Yeah, so for the normies out there, to explain it like you're 5, but you grew up in at least like
I like
early
to treat people like they're
2000s,
at least 10.
90s, right? So that you have the proper context. The DNS is like a phone book where the issues arise is if you're not pointing at the right phone book.
Or your phone number changed.
Yeah.
And the record's stale.
Yeah.
Like that.
Heaven help you.
Yeah, that's where it's like, again, where a lot of people gets their complications and they get frustrated with DNS is if you don't keep up with it, if you don't stay on top of the changes, when you go to the website, it doesn't work. If you try to hit that name inside of your infrastructure, it may not resolve. And that's because you do have to keep up with some level of maintenance with it, of saying, hey, this record is going to change. Like, again, part of one of the main things that I do is email migration projects, and like going from one email provider to the next, you have to go into the public and private DNS sometimes and go and update saying, hey, service was over here. Now it's pointing over here. And that's just something that's required. And a lot of people, they don't understand that. It's like, look, when you look at DNS, you see all these different record types. You have text records, you have different types of A records, you have CNAME records, MX records, www records, things of all that nature of like each one has its own purpose of what is it naming and referencing to when it comes to your domain. All it is that it is just a purpose. So an MX is for mail, www, which is part of the A records, is for obviously going to your website. A lot of it is very self-explanatory. Again, if you just look at the manual and go, this means this. And why do I have to have this? Because I want this service to work through this domain name that's on this IP address. I have to tell the public web, hey, public web, when you go to this address, it needs to resolve to this for this service. That's all you're doing.
Yeah, it's a relatively complicated thing, but that's because the problem that it's solving is a complicated thing.
I would say that as far as DNS goes, the thing itself, what DNS is, what it does, that's relatively simple. It's all the different branches, the things that lead into it,
Yeah.
are relatively complicated.
Yeah, that's completely fair.
But yeah, that's mine. So Matthew, you got an
I have
acronym
one that's
for us?
not really hostile so much as like this one I kind of threw in there to follow up on our previous episode. RSS, really simple syndication. So when we're talking about
Is it like a crime syndicate?
no, when we're talking about how do we find information on the web and then keep up with that information. So when John's talking about, DNS, part of it is you have to keep up to date. How do we, let's say we find a blog, right? How do we keep up to date with that blog and make sure that we get those updates? Well, if you have a RSS reader, so a really simple syndication reader, all it is on the back end is you are reading XML, either files or pages or whatever. XML is extensible markup language, so that's 2 acronyms for you. This is an easy way to keep up with things. So, for example, I have set up a list of feeds that I follow, and then I can open up my feed reader, and it will just pull all the most recent updates. So, like the software will go out, check the feed, see what's new, and then organize everything, kind of like an inbox. So like mail, but it's for blog posts and stuff. The cool thing is that a lot of things support this. This is a very robust, very well-known protocol. So things like YouTube channels. I think there's there's RSS and then there's Atom. I don't know if Atom is a acronym or not, but that's the new fangled RSS. Things like YouTube channels support Atom feeds. Things like our podcast is served as an RSS feed. So if you wanted to follow us for whatever reason, not on Substack or on any of the big platforms, you could grab the RSS feed from, I think, Substack. So
Yeah, I
you'd
think
still
it's
be
a
tied
yes.
to that
Yeah.
anyway. And there you go.
So, fun fact, actually, apparently, the way Substack actually pushes out the podcast to pretty much all other platforms is RSS.
So the thing about that is RSS is it's not a pushing out protocol. It's a pulling in protocol. It's a subscriber protocol, if that makes sense. So for example, like YouTube, let's say that I have my in the list of feeds is a YouTube channel, and then let's say Jeff Geerling, right? Just because I want to give him a shout out. He's got a really cool channel. I love watching those videos. He uploads a new video. That is not going to show up in my feed until I refresh the feed. Now that can happen manually. I can set it up to be automatic. But technically how it's working is my software is reaching out and grabbing that. It's not being sent to me automatically.
It's working
if that makes sense.
Oh gosh, I had a local mail client reaching out to a cloud mailbox.
Yeah, it's just it's not a
where a lot of people think that they open their Outlook and the mail just comes to their Outlook.
Yeah.
It's like, no, the mail goes to the actual mailbox, which is in the cloud, and your local Outlook is just pinging and talking to that cloud mailbox periodically and saying, hey, you got anything new?
I think
Hey,
to
you got
be
anything
fair,
new?
since we called it mail, what some like boomers probably think is that, oh, well, there's just like a digital mail car that comes and delivers stuff into my inbox. When that's not quite how it works, it's actually the opposite, where
Yeah.
your house, your house, or in this case, your inbox has a mail vehicle that goes and gets the mail for you.
It's actually like you going to the post office. All your mail goes to the post office, and you
Kinda,
have to go
yeah.
get the mail periodically.
That's also good. But in this
Or
case,
actually, in this case, you're hiring somebody to go do it for you.
like if you're doing IMAP, you're doing POP, then it would be how I described it. where
We don't
you
need to
send
talk
the-
about POP.
Yeah.
But both of those
We
are old
don't-
protocols that
we don't need to talk
recommend
about
anymore
POP.
anyway,
We could explain those acronyms. If we
POP
really
three
want
is
to.
a horrible
we're not
idea
going to
to begin
IMAP,
with.
POP, SNMP. We're not doing any
okay.
of that.
Okay, so did you have
No.
anything
I
else?
have one more that we could
No,
rant
no,
about.
no, no, no.
No,
Hold
there-
on.
there-
Hold on.
there-
Hold on.
no, there's one
Hold
that
on.
we're going to discuss.
Okay,
Hold.
Okay, hold. So we are going to hold with one exception. We're going to hold everything else because there's a bit more here that we can use for future dunking on acronyms. But Jonathan, is this the one that you were going to go talk about, or which one did you want to go with?
Oh, no, I'm going with this guy.
Do it.
All right. The one that I absolutely hate the most, and it's not because it's a bad acronym, it's what the acronym allows, and that is BYOD. In terms of IT, that is bring your own device, because I would prefer the other one, which is bring your own drinks, because that is way more fun.
Yeah, absolutely.
But bring your own device is such a horrendous idea when it comes to like anyone who's managed IT before. Of what do we enjoy most? We want standardization. We want everything that we deploy, that we use, that we support as a fleet needs to be the same. BYOD goes 100% against this because now you are having a user, an individual, come into your organization and want to use a personal device to do their work. And you don't have full control of that device. You don't have full visibility into it. And you actually can't really tell the user how they should be operating that device because we don't own it. And now we're having to install additional software and services onto a device we don't own to manage a small subsection of it rather than the entire thing, which I know this is sounding like, oh, you're just wanting control. You're just wanting to really kind of be the dictator over that device.
Yes.
And in some way, actually, yes, we
Yes,
do.
absolutely.
But it's for
This is just big IT infringing on my freedoms.
a little bit, but it's for the benefit of the entire organization. Is, let me ask you this question. When you take your machine home and you decide to go to a sketchy website, or you download a sketchy program, or you do something that, again, may not be to company standards, like you do something and you bring that machine back into the org and you potentially cause a compromise or a much larger security event because you were being foolish at home with a device that you use for work, you now just impacted the entire business because of it.
Yeah, what then are your expectations for repercussions for
Yeah.
that?
Or when a device breaks in the office that's personally owned, what can we actually do? Since we didn't deploy it, we're not technically managing that device. We're only managing a small subsection of software on it. We just have to go, cool, you're SOL. You need to go to the store and go buy another one.
Yeah, this is one of those. It's the Ghostbusters syndrome. Who you going to call? It's like, it's
Well,
so
everybody.
in
this
Everybody
case,
on the
if it
user
is-
side. No, everybody on the user side wants to tout this as like so much more convenient and such a better option. And this makes life
I can have the
easier.
device that
Wants to
exactly
do-
that I want.
Yeah, I want. Blah blah blah. It's all great and fine
And
until
finance
it
likes it because they
breaks.
don't have to pay
Because
for it.
everything breaks. Every process, every machine, everything always breaks. So when it breaks, who are you going to call to fix it? Oh, you're going to call IT to fix it. And so if that's going to be the expectation, why then can IT not dictate that, okay, if we're the ones that are having to set it up and we're the ones having to fix it, we're the ones ultimately responsible for everything. Cool. You people are going to use the standardized set of things that we say you're
I like
going to
how
use,
I'm being the
and you're
you
going to
people
suck
here.
it up.
So in
It's
my
'cause it's
opinion,
the way my
in my opinion,
microphone's like direction.
to your point, in my opinion, that if you sign up for BYOD, that it should be understood that you're on the hook for it.
Yeah.
Like you're
It
already
should
on the
be.
hook for it.
You would think.
It should be understood that
Well,
you're on the hook for
But
it.
here's the other issue to
Oddly
it
enough,
is,
that doesn't happen.
yeah, but here's the other issue to it is, what if that device is like either old or just straight up is on a platform that's just not compatible with our infrastructure?
Yep.
We can't do anything about that,
Mhm.
but the user is going to constantly complain and moan and ask, why can't my stuff just work? because it just natively is not supported by our platforms.
Because Microsoft say so.
And
you have a problem with it, go talk to them.
And it's like, well, now you're looking at from the business.
I want a Chrome OS laptop.
I hate that for
Yeah,
you.
no.
I really do.
It's like you have to be able to have a machine that meets certain metrics. And again, in my professional opinion, the easiest way is cool. If we have to do that, the company should be providing that machine, not the user.
And
if
I think
if you want your machine to look pretty, put stickers on it.
so. I think
Not over the vents.
I think it depends on, for one, the user, right? So like the average, Cheryl in HR, right? You just provision her a device and she's stuck with it. Like she just needs to. She's probably the kind of user that the device needs to be locked down anyway. But then you have situations where you have, like me, a developer. I don't get to BYOD, and I don't need to BYOD because they do a good job where I work as far as giving us enough freedom to work and install our tools. Like that's just the nicest thing.
That's just a
from
consideration
what I hear,
of the like that. That's just part of the responsibility of the IT team is considering those edge cases and ensuring that the solution fits the workload that you have. That fits. It's like, okay, we have X number of employees, we have X number of departments, we have this many departments that are all standardized. They fit this standardization. We have 2 departments that have specialized roles and need specialized resources, and you just have to take that into consideration. And once you do that, and you form up this weird thing, it's called a plan. It's called a plan. You actually plan out the resources and who gets what and what you choose so that it works with everything else. And then you do the even crazier thing: document it.
Yeah.
It's a weird word, I know.
And the weird thing is,
but once you do that, then everything works and it's fine.
Yeah, because you can standardize an individual department for those machines. It's like, again, when I did corporate, we had standard machines for the C-suite, for the directors. We had standard machines for, again, HR departments had to have specific ones. We had to have ones for our development team. But then everyone else in the org, guess what? You got the exact same standard task-based workstation to be able to do your job. We did have edge cases, but the thing on those edge cases, they were still set to a standard fleet of machines that we can day in and day out easily get and support.
You analyze the edge case, you establish what the difference needs to be from the standardization, you ensure that that's compatible with the overall infrastructure, and then you distribute whatever's needed for that edge case.
Because BYOD, you as a developer, here's the more complicated part is not every developer actually knows what hardware they need. And if we're saying, cool, it is on you, the developer right here, to get and bring in a machine that you need to do your job. You're going to have a developer now. You may have 10 developers, and you're probably going to have 10 different machines at 10 different spec levels.
Yeah.
How are you?
And that's the thing is that not all users are created equal. And that's across the whole spectrum. That's not just our, however we had it defined, where you have the normies, the average, the above average, and the super users. The same thing goes for developers, right? You can have some that are just script kiddies that they really don't know jack squat about hardware,
Please
at all.
Script kiddie.
Okay, so a script kiddie, this is actually becoming more prevalent with LLMs and vibe coding, right? But the idea is that you don't really know what you're doing. You know enough to be dangerous, but not in a good way, if that makes sense. So hackers, like the dunce caps, the normies, right, are typically referred to. Normie hackers are typically referred to as script kiddies because they know enough to where
the one who just
they can download a script and they can execute it, but they have no clue what it's doing.
They're not writing the script.
They buy the mailing list, they buy the script to execute it, they put the 2 things together and send it out.
Yeah. Like they know enough to be dangerous, but not enough to know what they're doing.
Because that's that's where I always say is I am not a developer. I'm not a software dev. I've never claimed to be, but I know how to script. But I'm not going to the internet and finding a random one and executing it. I am usually writing my own or modifying one that I did find because I understand the building blocks and the foundation of what the script does. And that's the difference here is look, you have people who know how to execute a script, but they don't know how to build it and maintain it. And that's a huge problem in this day, especially with LLMs, is it's really easy to get a script.
The barrier of entry is even lower than it was just 2-3 years ago.
But it's much harder to understand what it's doing because, again...
It's not harder to understand what it's doing. It's it's easier to get going without knowing what you're doing.
Okay,
I think.
that is fair.
If
But
anything, with LLMs, it's even easier to understand what's going on. You're just choosing not to understand what's
yeah,
going on.
but it's also you're going to run into into the scenario of when it breaks and the LLM can't tell you why it's broken, or it gets into a feed loop. You're screwed. There's nothing you can do at that stage.
Yeah.
So,
And-
to
but
back it up,
to back
into
it to BYOD,
BYOD. I think, in my opinion, now I don't BYOD, and I haven't again, the organization didn't hire me to just babysit me, right? Like that's the nice thing is that I hear the horror stories of different super large organizations that you have to beg and plead for every little thing.
Even small organizations.
Yeah, here they didn't. They hired me to do a job, and they gave me a computer so that I can do the job. Right, I'm allowed to install the tools. I don't have to go to IT every time I need to update Visual Studio or whatever. I can just install it because they hired me to do a job, and they let me do the job. They didn't hire me just so that IT could babysit me. That's what pisses me off when I hear about the large organizations that have super locked down things.
Yeah.
And then they wonder why they're so large and bloated and they can't, their people don't get
Well,
anything done.
and that's because it's under a model known as zero trust, which is
And I understand
and
that.
because again, you're at now that this is going to be we're not going to get into this here, but you're
It's
having
a whole episode right there.
it is a whole episode of security versus convenience, and there's always a fine line that you have to tread there. And that's where it's like going back to BYOD is when it comes to that security versus convenience, because you want the user to have a good experience with their machine, but we also want to have a good experience supporting it. And that's where it's like the hill I will die on is saying, no, I do not want a workstation, meaning a laptop or a desktop, a user brings in. The thing that I will make the exception for is if we're going to have some level of BYOD that is mobile devices, phones and tablets. I will say, fine, if you want to bring that in and use it for work, you can do that. However, there is a worksheet that you have to fill out that your device has to meet this standard here. It needs to be fully up to date, needs to be within this last, certain number of years. It can't be jailbroken, things of that nature.
Yeah.
You can use it for business as long as it meets this criteria. Awesome. We will say, cool, you can now have a very basic management app put onto it with your work email and maybe a couple authenticator apps that you're going to need for security purposes.
Yeah.
Beyond that, I absolutely despise the idea of BYOD because it is from an IT professional an absolute nightmare to try and tread that water and keep your environment operational, happy, healthy, and users not constantly at your door.
So from that aspect, just to hold on, Nathan. From that aspect, we do have that's pretty much how we're set up. So we don't have BYOD for devices. We take that back. We kind of do, but not really. It's frowned upon. But for the mobile device aspect of things, we do have 2FA, and that's 2FA through a phone. In very rare circumstances, they will provision a little device that generates the code for you. But in most cases, they say, hey, you have to have a phone to install it on. And the software has there's a minimum level of Android or iOS that you have to have. So there is that. But that's the only thing that phones are used for. So yeah, I would say that it would almost be kind of dumb for the company to provide all these things because you're providing the devices, you're also having to provide the service and all that other stuff. That seems like it's kind of a waste since almost everybody these days has a smartphone. I feel like that's an instance where you're taking on too much on the IT side of things.
So we have to keep in mind that as of now, the only real reason to offer BYOD is for the company to avoid having to buy hardware. That's it. The reality is you don't, in the vast majority of situations, there is no reason for it, especially on the workstation side of things. The company should just provision a laptop or a desktop for you. If they're like, oh, we're BYOD, it's not to your benefit. It's not to you, the end user's benefit. It's to their benefit. And if some company wants to go over that route, fine. Then they should give you an extra $2,000 or something like that to cover a device. But they're not going to.
BYOD benefits everybody but IT that's managing the devices. Because it benefits the company from a cost standpoint, kind of, right? Like we can make the argument that the man hours that would have to be put into maintaining this, like what Steven's talking about. You could make an argument that it would end up costing more, but typically that's what that looks like. The the provision devices and everything locked down with group policies and stuff like that, that benefits IT
See, that's
and
not
the company,
that's
but
not what I'm
not
talking.
necessarily the user.
That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the cost of the machines. You are if it's BYOD, the company doesn't have to spend the money to properly outfit their employees. And as like for me personally, I refuse to use my personal phone on BYOD. If you want me to have a phone, cool, you're giving me a phone. You want me to have a cell phone, you're giving me a cell phone. If you're fine with me just being able to make calls from my laptop, cool, that's fine. I'll do that. But I will not use my phone for company.
That's fair.
You are responsible for giving me
I agree with
all
that.
of the tools to do my job. Because also for my particular job, I don't need I don't need most of what I do. I don't need an edge case machine. I am perfectly fine with whatever the standard machine is.
Yeah.
And frankly, the vast majority of people, what their job actually entails, they do not need and should not use any sort of edge device. They should use whatever the standard device is. Now, software, that is a completely different discussion in compared to the actual hardware you're using. Now, that is, I 100% agree that there's a lot of companies, whether they're small or large, do overly lock down from a software perspective, but that is far less egregious than, oh well, you just have to provide everything yourself. No, if I'm providing everything for myself, that's called a contractor.
Yeah.
That's a whole different thing.
Yeah, which we're not going to get into that. And I think honestly, if we need to go further in depth on BYOD and the general practices around it, I think a dedicated episode or in reference to one we actually did in the past that kind of went over this a bit more. I mean, we'll definitely put that in the description for y'all to listen to, and definitely give us feedback if you want to kind of refresher on it, or maybe some updates on the modernization of BYOD in the current business stack. Like, let us know. Get shoot us an email. Go ahead and send us a message. But I think on that note, Steven, if you don't have anything else, can you go ahead and close this out?
We appreciate y'all joining us today on the Hostility in the Morning podcast. If you stayed this long and you like what you heard, leave a comment. Let us know. Pretty please. We really like comments. We'd love to hear from you guys. You can also hit us up on X, Facebook, Instagram, or you can email us at info@hostilityinthemorning.com. We upload every other Tuesday, very early, on Substack, Spotify, Apple Podcast, and YouTube. If you want a one-stop shop for everything hostile, you can find us at hostilityinthemorning.com. And remember, have a mostly hostile morning.